mercy. We only have a few moments, actually, for questions and answers, because I know that the images of the sweet potatoes made you hungry, and now the images of the citronette have made you thirsty. And so I'll just open things up again. We have the mics if anyone has a question for either our keynote or any of our wonderful panelists this morning.
Hi, thank you for the really informative and wonderful talks. I think my question is more for Dr. Gordon, but I wanted to ask it at the end because I saw all of the titles and I think it's apt for everybody here. So my research is more on the energy side of things, clean power. If all of my research is wildly successful, what we will see in a few years is a circular fuel economy where instead of taking our oxides and dumping them into the atmosphere, we're actually collecting them and recycling them. But what keeps me up at night is that to kickstart this is going to mean an increase in extractive activities for a period of time. And I think that's true for any aspect of the energy transition, is that there's going to be this increase in extractive activities and, of course, all of the negative things that come along with that for biodiversity, for the natural world around these sites, and for the people, especially Indigenous people living around these sites. So how do we reconcile these two things that are in tension and are at odds, but are working towards the same thing, which is a more sustainable world?
That was a wonderful question, and I think it's something that sometimes keeps me up at night too, in the type of work that I do, how we do it, and the types of solutions that we try to push forward to changing policies and things like that. I know that there was an example that became really famous of a successful windmill farm somewhere in Latin America. And they were able to successfully grow the number of windmills and produce a lot of power for the country and area. However, what was less advertised was the fact that the Indigenous community around the windmill farms really suffered, not only in the beginning when they had to take land to put up these wind farms, and they were like, no, but we're going to hire people in the community, and people are going to be involved. But with that came a lot of job loss once more corporations started coming in and putting money into it. Not only that, the influx of some money in the beginning that literally started to go away made a lot of people who lost their farms, and now I have some money, that's great, but now I have nothing sustainable. Caused a lot of different types of issues in the community. So there was a lot of local harm, but it spread as a positive story for windmill farming, right? And so one thing when I started at Cornell, I wanted to make sure that in addition to the research that we're doing and the teams that I'm in, that we think a little bit about climate justice and environmental justice. So that's involving scientists that actually are understanding, that are studying these sorts of things that I don't look at and I don't think about, and I might not even notice until a lot of my studies get too far and the harm has already been done. And so really trying to mitigate that harm, and not only that, anticipate the harm that can come in before we even implement a lot of these sort of strategies. And so Cornell was really receptive of that, and now we're hiring a whole new slew of faculty in environmental justice, and we're starting to build a center and bringing funding towards it. So it's bringing in the expertise that are going to answer the questions that were also keeping me up in mind, but that I didn't know how to solve. How do we solve it? We solve it through more research. We solve it with people that are actually going to go into communities and make sure that they are seated at the table of not only the work that we're doing, but that they're seated from the beginning, right? That we're involving local scientists, and it takes sometimes a team to make sure that the places that have the resources and are going into other places around the world recognize whose lands that they're going to be going into and what type of help they're going to be doing over time to that end stage goal, right? From the very beginning. But yeah, it's a very big struggle that I think we're all starting to now I think, talk about more, and I think that's a good thing. That's a key thing. But great question.
I see our thank you for that. I see our last question. Is you.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. My question is to Dr. Boudram and her colleague. I had the good fortune a few years back to actually work on a community-based disaster risk reduction project, and it was totally outside of my background. But one of the things which I learned certainly was if you're actually looking to do disaster risk reduction, communities are key, and feedback and involvement of people in the communities are key. I mean, yes, they are the national disaster agencies, but I don't think that they necessarily have that minutia of information to actually be of, putting it, of much use to people that are actually on the ground and suffering. So my question is, you haven't done this research now at the university. How are you translating this information which is framed within the academic sphere? How is that then being translated to the national agencies responsible for disaster risk reduction to help them better able to service and serve the people in the communities who are actually the ones suffering the effects of these disasters resulting from climate change?
That's a good question, and I think what we did from the beginning was met with the chairman of the Penal Debe Regional Corporation, which represented the local government side of the equation, and signaled our intention to conduct this research. And so from a very participatory framework, the regional corporation believed that they were part of designing and then implementing the project. And that helped us tremendously, because what that spurned was those persons who represented local government in these communities affected by repeated flooding. They started to engage with seminars and workshops around community resilience. And they're also very much in favor of us continuing the work, and this time now shifting it to phase 2, which is really the community engagement aspect, where we are designing a participatory action project where we engage with people in co-designing a toolkit that is highly contextual and offers, therefore, that connections between level 1 and getting to level 4 by designing it with people who are representatives of the communities, and especially people who are representatives of different community groups. You know, we have young people, people who represent the disabled population, persons within religious organizations, and so on. When we do the trainers, part of that participatory action project is a portfolio-based assessment. You know, how do you then transfer this in knowledge to people within your community? And so we can see that this can be a model to start a movement. And I don't think the messaging that comes maybe from a central body is sufficient, because it is not contextualized. It's very general and doesn't offer persons good insight into how they can prevent and how they can recover. By engaging in a participatory work, we also developing a framework of self-governance. All of these organizations and representatives coming together to develop their social capital. And Mayanga has a very good capital-based approach to developing community resilience. And I think this model is well situated within that model, so that we are not only building knowledge, but we're also building community resilience and social capital, so that persons who are affected by a particular natural disaster can get assistance from others who may not, through that social capital building.
That's great. Thank you so much.